The story of a tiny bean called coffee started in Arabia and has become a part of the daily life of the world to the borders of Antarctica. It is thought that the word coffee originated from the Arabic word kawa, and the word kawa originated from the Kaffa region where coffee was grown. Coffee spread to the world from Africa and is made of the ground seeds of the coffee tree. It is assumed that the coffee was first used in Ethiopia, where the coffee trees grow naturally. According to another legend, a shepherd who lived in Arabia in the 9th century first became aware of the value of coffee beans. The shepherd, who lived in Kaffa, present-day Ethiopia, noticed that the animals in his herd were more active after eating the red fruits of a kind of bush, and tried the fruits himself. He then experienced the feeling and pleasure given by the coffee and informed others about it, and thereby introduced mankind to coffee. Coffee first appeared between the years of 500 and 800 AD. During this period, the coffee beans were taken to Yemen from Ethiopia. The most credible story about how coffee beans were taken to Yemen from Ethiopia is that one of the great masters of the Sufi sect, Omer Esh Shadili, took the beans from Ethiopia to Yemen himself. When he arrived in Yemen, he resided in a seaport called Mocha and became known as the Dervish of Mocha. Yes, Mocha coffee that you drink in Starbucks and Gloria Jeans or in fancy French cafes and perhaps presume is French or Italian does in fact come from Yemen. Its name also originates here. The Mocha port was very important during the Ottoman Empire, whereas Europe and the Western world would not meet coffee for another 1,000 years. Coffee, so very popular in the Western world today, spread to the world through Islam. Coffee became a religious drink because it reduced the need for sleeping and was consumed in considerable amounts amongst the dervishes during the daytime. That is why the coffee was taken to anywhere that Islam spread. Coffee was taken to Europe for the first time in 1615 by the travellers who went east and was considered a medicine at the start. It then became more and more popular because of its stimulant and sleep-reducing effects. The taste of coffee was appreciated by the Europeans and it reached Marseille in 1644 and then almost instantly to Lyon. This habit spread towards the inner parts of France fast and was introduced to the high society of Paris by the ambassador of the Ottomans, the Emperor Suleiman Agha. While the coffee drinking habit became more and more widespread in France, it was introduced in Great Britain in 1650 and was welcomed with admiration. During the beginning of the second half of the 17th century, a series of coffee houses, whose fame continues to this day, were established and took a place in the daily life of the city. While the coffee houses in Paris were the centres of intellectual activities, they were also serving another group, the progressing bourgeoisie in London. The best examples of this are the coffee houses opened by Edward Lloyd in Tower Street in London in 1687. The Italians learnt the coffee culture from travellers who learnt well the traditions of the Ottomans. especially through the efforts of Luigi Ferdinando Marsigli. Marsigli shared his observations on the coffee culture with his fellow citizens through his book Bevanda Asiatica Brindata. The siege of Vienna by the Ottoman Empire introduced coffee to Eastern Europe. The Ottoman army left a lot of supplies at the gates of Vienna when they failed to conquer the city and returned home. The coffee beans present amongst those goods were found by the Polish immigrant Franz Kolchicki, who had also played an important role during the course of the siege. Kolchicki was also the first person to ever open a coffee house in Vienna. After this, coffee became very popular in Europe and countless coffee houses opened. Now, the coffee culture has started to influence the Western culture too. J.S. Bach composed his famous coffee cantata because he was so fond of coffee. The coffee culture both created its history and set its seal on social history. The French novelist Pierre Loti, who is famous for his affection of the Turks in Istanbul, was a regular in the coffee houses of Istanbul. A coffee house located in his favourite neighbourhood, where he frequently visited, is now named after him. Amongst the devotees of coffee during the 17th century and onwards are Madame de Pompadour, Victor Hugo, Dumas, Molière, André Gide and Honoré de Balzac. Coffee first entered the Ottoman palaces during the 16th century. It was brought to the Sultan of the time, Suleiman the Magnificent, by the governor of Yemen, Özdemir Pasha, and became one of the indispensable beverages of the palace. Turkish coffee was served in the majestic halls of the Ottoman palaces to the Sultan by a team of 40 coffee-making experts. The people who were commissioned to prepare coffee for the Sultan were Kahveci Pasha, the head of the coffee makers. The head coffee makers were commissioned to make coffee for the Sultan and other important statesmen, and were chosen from the people who were loyal and knew how to keep secrets. These coffee makers used to wear white gloves while making the coffee. They would bring the coffee to the gates of the harem, knock on the door, and pass the coffee to the treasurer on duty. Turkish coffee had taken its place in the social life of Turkish society and had become an indispensable part of Turkish hospitality. There is a Turkish saying, "A cup of coffee creates respect for 40 years for the one who offers it," and this saying reflects how important coffee is in Turkish culture. Coffee and coffee houses have played an important role in the process of the East influencing the West. The English traveller Charles Macfarlane, who witnessed the most critical years of the Reformation epoch of the Ottomans, describes the changing culture texture of urban life with the following comment: "The Turks cannot live without coffee."